Welcome, everyone. We are back with another episode of Indie Reads Aloud. As everybody knows by now, we've been doing this for more than 3 years. I'm a freak and I love books, and I love it when people read out loud to me because I'm just a recovering 6-year-old. And also, as you all know, my really big passion in life is to expose everybody to a bunch of different books from a bunch of different authors. And today we have a new author to me. I met her at an event last year, Angie Roullier. Welcome, Angie. I'm so glad you're here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Diana.
So before we begin, I just want to throw out a listener advisory for anybody who might have little ears listening in on today's episode. There is an advisory for mature themes, language, and drug use. So if any of those are sensitive topics, or if you're triggered by any of those things, you might want to preview this before you let your little ones listen in. Thanks for joining me. It's so fun. As one who grows up in the library, as we were just talking about off camera, I just love being exposed to different books and different viewpoints and different perspectives on everything. I used to write research papers on my summer vacation for fun. So I'm really, yeah, I know, I'm a little nutty. So I'm really excited to learn about you and your writing journey. Can you tell me a little bit about your background?
As we had spoken with before, I was a realtor for 20 years. And then I had some hereditary health conditions that had come along. Doctors had thrown every pill on the planet at me, and it was just continuing to deteriorate. And this is back about 2010 when the cannabis caregiver market came to Michigan. So, like most of us, cannabis became a last-ditch effort to try and help myself with my medical condition. So I figured, what the heck? I'd give it a shot and looked into it, and I was fascinated by this plant and how it could help naturally. Just using botanicals. This does not mean that it is a harmless drug, because it is still a drug. But it does have the potential to help certain people. So I was wildly curious, and I fell down the rabbit hole. And to this day, it has been 13 years since, I read every research paper that I can get my hands on. And
Yep.
it is extremely important to consider your source. I mean, Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, National Institute of Health.
Absolutely. And that's really something that I'd like to stress to our listening audience today, is that your book is called Pot for the People, and this is a health alternative medicine nonfiction book. So you've done a lot of research. You've talked to a lot of physicians. This doesn't, I don't want anybody to negate speaking to their own medical professionals and doing their own research, but you're coming at this from a very solid point of investigation and research. This isn't just, I went to a party one day and it was fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. I have over 180 cited references to where people can go and fall down those rabbit holes themselves. Okay, I am not medically trained in any way. I'm not legally trained in any way. These are the things that I have come across and that I had found that were interesting, and all of the links are attached at the bottom of the pages to my references. Please go look,
Yeah, no,
read,
that's fantastic. Yeah, giving
just
people the opportunity to do their own investigation, I think, is really important. But again, when I was in college, one of my research papers I did was on stem cell research.
oh yeah.
And I chose that topic because I knew nothing about it. And at the end of 15 weeks, I learned a lot about it. So I applaud you for looking into something that might be a little controversial, but at the same time, the education you got just had to be amazing.
Oh, and it is daily. I learn so much every day, and when I find something that I think that, the regular Joe would be interested in, or how it can apply to their lives, I shoot it from the rooftops. I can't get it out there fast enough, whether it be positive or negative. People need to know about drug interactions. People
Right,
need to understand, the difference between eating it and smoking it.
right.
Are topicals going to get in your bloodstream? I mean, all of these questions.
All good questions.
that I thought just needed to be addressed in the plainest English possible.
And that's the thing that I think is really important for people to understand about your book, is that it is a book for the layman.
Very much so.
It's a book for, as you say, average people. So I'm excited to hear a little bit about this, and I'd love to have you read a little bit for me, and then we can talk more afterward.
I would love
So
to.
when, again, I'm a nut. Nonfiction I enjoy as much as fiction. So a 6-year-old sitting on the carpet, just, have that picture in your head. So when you are ready, please take the microphone and read aloud.
All right. Thank you, Diana. Okay, so this is my story about a patient interaction that I had regarding dementia in Cannabis. The National Institute of Aging defines dementia as a blanket term to cover a variety of mental afflictions. It is the loss of cognitive functioning, thinking, remembering, and reasoning, to such an extent that it interferes with the person's daily life and activities. Some people with dementia cannot control their emotions, and their personalities may change. Up close and personal, dementia is scary and heart-wrenching all at the same time. The person that you knew and loved is past the point of no return, and there isn't a damn thing anybody can do about it. Every now and again, it feels nothing short of divine intervention when a consultant is paired up with a patient. It's as if the cannabis-confused stranger in front of you was meant just for you. Sometimes it's because you both share the same medical condition or life experiences, or it could be as insignificant as commiserating over your local sports teams. This story is about how an 80-something-year-old man taught me how to see beyond my initial reactions and left a mark on my heart. "Hi, loser," Stu said with a crooked smile. Oh boy, I thought, am I really starting my day with degradation? I replied with a level tone, "So now how could you know such a thing when we just met?" Stu leaned in a little closer as my coworkers within earshot stopped what they were doing to see if I was going to make this a teachable moment or if I forgot to pack my patience that morning. "Your shirt. I can see you're a fan of our loser baseball team. That makes you a loser too." I couldn't help but smile at this gentleman's attempt to be charming. Testing our communication boundaries, I said, "Well, are you one of those diehards that have been dedicated to our football team since the beginning of time? Because if you are, it makes you an even bigger loser than me." With a shared chuckle and the staff returning to their tasks, disappointed that I didn't snap, we both agreed that our teams were the worst and moved on to the matter at hand. Stu's bride, as he lovingly referred her to, was stuck in the nightmare that is dementia. Even though she was becoming more and more violent every day, the family decided to release her from the hospital, whose method of treatment was to strap her to a bed and feed her the highest concentrations of sedatives known to man. With tears in his eyes, he was bordering on begging for something, anything to help her. Her pain levels weren't the issue. In fact, she didn't take any painkillers at all, but solid sleep was. The less his wife rested, the more likely she was to beat and batter the family in the home. Gently, I asked Stu if she had a sweet tooth, as this would help me to know if tinctures, which sounded like would be a nightmare to administer, or sugary edibles would be better. "Sometimes I think she loves chocolate more than she loves me," Stu said, having regained his composure. Not really trusting that any intake recommendations would make it back to the family unchanged, I wrote down the instructions for him to take. With a "see you, loser," Stu left the shop with a spring in his shuffle. Not 3 hours later, Stu had returned with his daughter and son-in-law, who were pretty combative about my recommendations and Stu's purchases. It wouldn't be the first time I have been blamed for taking advantage of an elderly patient for pushing them into buying the wrong thing. It's almost always by family members who wanted Pop Pop or Gam Gam to bring home some super high milligram stuff for them. They explained the family situation again and were adamant that the milligrams I advised Stu to start with weren't even close to what they wanted for her. "She needs to be drugged. She needs to be sedated at all times," urged Stu's daughter, who was bruised from yesterday's battle with her mom. And there it was. I was automatically protective of both Stu, his bride, and my recommendation. Are these people actually asking me to recommend something that will render this poor woman immobile? Oh, hell no. Cannabis is about quality of life. It's not meant to induce zombie-like reactions. I mean, isn't that the whole reason you discharged her from the hospital? I clapped back. After a very heavy, long pause, Stu's daughter Lynn revealed herself to be a nurse that had seen traditional medicine fail her family, and much like her father hours earlier, was just about begging for an alternative solution. It instantly made perfect sense that this woman in front of me was a caretaker of others. It also made me feel a bit better knowing that her mother was discharged from the hospital and released into her care. Lynn had a very old soul. She was one of those formidable females that demanded respect and attention as soon as she entered the room. There was zero doubt that this woman was the matriarch of her family. I bet you she got it from her mom. And now it was my turn to beg. I pleaded with them to try the initial purchase, and with Lynn being a nurse and ever mindful of drug interactions, she could adjust different ratios and milligram amounts. I expressed my hope that they would land on the right combination of cannabinoids to calm her mother, but not knock her out. About a week later, Stu returned with his now endearing greeting of "Hi, loser," and his freshly scratched and days-old bruise-covered daughter. Lynn reported that they tried a few different combinations without any change in the violent attacks, and it ended up giving her half the chocolate bar in one sitting. I froze. "You're kidding," came out of my mouth before I could stop it. It didn't help that I still had it stuck in the back of my mind that these folks just wanted her completely comatose. But before I could scold her for being so reckless, she said with a shrug of her shoulder, "It didn't faze her." Unable to find another statement, I said again, "You have got to be kidding me." Both Stu and Lynn confirmed that while she didn't move around the house as much during the intoxication period, her verbal abuse continued and they still couldn't get close, as Lynn's scratches attested to. But they both agreed it was better than before and wanted to continue using cannabis as treatment. I immediately became uncomfortable with the conversation, as I knew what the next question was going to be. "Do you have anything stronger?" asked Stu, with the hope in his eyes again. I generally don't recommend RSO to those without cancer or very specific directions from their doctor. But outside of offering that woman eat several candy bars a day, RSO was the strongest product in the place. I explained why the whole plant concentrate may work better and differently than the distillate infused candy, and repeated the dosage and a very stern warning to be overly cautious when it came to the amber colored syringe. I also offered the advice of buying only one, because all of this trial and error can get expensive. They both agreed and left with one RSO syringe and another chocolate bar as a treat for her. Another couple of weeks had passed before I saw the father and daughter duo in the lobby again. My first thought was that the RSO was just way too much for her, and I tried to stuff away my "I told you so" speech. But it happened that I returned to my simply shocked, "Are you kidding me" response when I was told that they made a sandwich out of the RSO and candy bar. "Kind of like a s'more. She always loves s'mores," Stu said with a touch of nostalgia in his voice. At this point, I'm trying to do both the math on how many milligrams she took and find any words at all for the situation. Now, I've seen ridiculous tolerances for cannabis in those that consistently overpartake and in those that take high doses of painkillers for decades. But this lady took the cake. I was rendered speechless. They started out by giving her a couple of pieces of chocolate periodically during the day as a reward for good behavior or a bribe for better behavior. They took what was left of the chocolate bar and literally squished a quarter gram of RSO between the pieces right before bed. According to Lynn, for the first couple of days, it was touch and go. Sometimes the candy worked in curbing her violent attacks, and sometimes she wanted nothing to do with her treats and would just rage on. True to her calling, Lynn had been keeping a journal of all of her mom's vitals with different dosages, ratios, and products up to this point. Stu jumped in on the storytelling by saying that once it became routine, she began lashing out less. Her mean-spirited outbursts were shorter, and at times almost mumbled, like she really didn't want to say them in the first place. Still floored by the amount of cannabis this woman can take in a sitting, I returned to consultant mode by remembering that there actually was a s'mores-like chocolate bar and offered to substitute it for the original one. For my efforts, I got a warm "thank you for paying attention" smile from Lynn and a wink and a "thanks, loser" from Stu. We stayed in contact, and sometimes I would even visit Stu at the curb when his wife made the trip with them. Every so often, she would have a morning or an afternoon when she was manageable in public, or mentally present enough to enjoy a Sunday car ride like the old days when their love was pure. I also got a few more minutes to talk smack with Stu about our Kerr sports teams. One such visit even included my promise to attend a ball game with Stu if one of our teams managed to make the playoffs. But since both of our teams were traditionally terrible, I figured it was a safe bet to make an old guy happy. Then one day, it was only Lynn in the lobby. She wasn't there for s'mores or arsenal. She was there to tell me that her mother had passed and that her father had followed his bride a very short time after. She gave me the kind of hug that would break your heart if you held on too long. She thanked me for helping her family and allowing Stu to be the only person that could get away with calling me a loser. With both of us laughing and crying, I made another promise, but this one to his daughter, that I would go to his funeral as requested. I had been working with medical marijuana patients for over 10 years, and Stu's funeral still has been the only one I have attended. But if having me at the funeral aided them in any way, I would be honored to help the family one last time. To date, neither of our teams have made the playoffs since my promise to Stu. But when that day comes, I know it will be because Stu is pulling some strings upstairs for all of us losers. I would like to add a note that last year, our world famous Detroit Lions actually did make the playoffs. And Lynn had sent me a text during playoff season, and we have zero doubt that it was completely all of Stu's doing. Thank you.
What a great story. Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry, I still tear up.
That's so much more interesting than the dry nonfiction I was expecting. Oh my goodness. That's fantastic. I love it when books surprise me. It's so much fun. So much fun. So how long did it take you to write this book, to compile all the research, to do all the, how long did it take to finish this project?
It was a lot more organizing. Because I had been doing this for so long, I'd had all this research and I used it daily when I worked the cannabis counter. And then it was a matter of what stories I wanted to tell and which ones I could tell. And I do have Lynn's permission. And all of the people that I speak about in my book, I absolutely do have their permission to tell these stories. I would say all in all, it took me about a year to get it all out, and then probably another 6 months of fighting with an editor. And, you know, I can't say that, and you have to understand the legality of what I'm speaking about, you know, before you start moving my stuff around. So
yeah. It's always a big challenge as an editor. It's always a big challenge to work with nonfiction and fiction.
And when it's you have
yeah, exactly. Yes, you have to like watch your P's and Q's sometimes. So in compiling these stories and thinking about organizing the book from beginning to end, was there anything that you thought, you know, that's really memorable, but I'm not sure this is the right forum to talk about? You don't have to tell us the story, but can you kind of describe maybe something that you had to wrestle with about to include or not to include?
There was. Again, this is broken down into 3 sections. Basically, it's people, plant, and policy. So I get into the plant and the science, which I really struggled with getting it out in layman's terms. And it was Einstein that says if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, then you don't know the topic well enough.
I'm your target audience. Yeah.
You are, Diana, you are. And then when it came to people, and I suppose I struggled with my own story a little bit more than the others, just because it's personal, and I am still kind of angry with, you know, my interaction with the doctors, you know, over the decades, and trying to get past that bitter to get my point across to actual people. You know, I mean, yeah, you can obviously pick up that I'm not happy about how things, you know, went. But now that, you know, things are different, I wanted people to pick up more on that than me just being another angry, down with the
Yeah, well,
establishment.
traditional medicine can sometimes frustrate us because there's not lot of wiggle room for let's try something new. I mean, especially in Western medicine, it's
Nuts.
yeah. I get the frustration. I do.
Yeah, and it takes decades
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get to the point. It's like they want to exhaust every milligram of that specific prescription before they'll even consider another prescription.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
was
and I get it from both ends. Used to work in the medical environment, so I get it from their perspective. I also get it from the other side. So
yeah, for sure.
yeah, it's a
And,
challenging thing, but
and
I'm glad you took it upon yourself to write this book and to share your experience with it. I think it's tremendously courageous of you to put this part of your life on the page. I mean, I feel that way about everybody, but I think you're already predisposed to battling people because this is such a controversial topic. So I want to applaud you for your courageousness in bringing your story forward.
oh, well, thank you so much. I think it helps people to understand that we're not just slinging weed.
Yeah. Yes.
We're not just drug dealers out there.
This is not the 60s anymore.
It, close, my goodness.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so
So,
glad that you came on the program. And if and when you ever write another book, I would love to have you back. You're a delight to talk to.
no, thank you so much for having me again, Diana.
Thank you.